Okay, I'm going to go through how organised crime exploits technology. The slides which this video is based on are up on now, and you'll find some additional links in the notes of the slides. Okay, there are also lots of additional links on now itself which you should find useful. There is also a recording, a lecture capture recording from last year available as well. So if it's now you're interested in, you can listen to this version, which should have quite clear audio because I'm doing it as a screen capture. But there'll be a slightly longer version that was from last year's lecture. So have a look at both of them. That you should find that helpful. So let's go through. I'm going to use these slides to give me a bit of structure. So, organised crime, the exploitation of technology. So serious and organised crime, SOC as it's sometimes known as. We're going to focus on UK and EU initiatives to counter serious and organised crime. I'm going to think briefly about how it differs from other crime, because that's quite useful. Really, one of the things that comes to mind is the sheer scale of the operations. So other offences we've looked at, other types of technology facilitated crime, okay, high-tech crime. Sometimes it's individuals or small groups of people or big organisations. It gives it away in the name. Serious organised crime is normally something that's operating at scale, okay? So it's much more akin to a kind of a criminal business or criminal enterprise is the term that's used. In terms of the organisation, well, the structure will vary. Some have got very clear structures, like big companies. Some are more like the kind of organisations that we'd associate with, for example, terrorist groups and stuff, where you don't necessarily have a very clear structure. And that's partly done to try and protect the people who are at the top that are running it, that the police and security services are primarily interested in. As I said, that's not always the case. What you will find, and I'll point you to this, is there's some really good case studies, some really good examples that we can look at from big policing organisations. So if it's an area you're interested in, go and have a look at these, right, that are linked in, and you'll find them really useful. The scale of operations, like I said, larger and more varied than individuals. Different structures, they will vary. The primary purpose here is to make money. Okay, so it's a business primarily. It's looking to make money. It may be looking to exercise power as well, but making money is one way to exercise power. Okay, so we know things like, for example, Mexican drug cartels exercise a lot of power. That's partly because they have money that allows them to buy goods and services and buy power, etc. Okay, so the reason that's important is that unlike some of the other crimes where their motivations may vary, okay, so it may be that if we're looking at certain types of trolling and stuff like that, then the motivation is to harm or to embarrass people. The motivation may be to, just get some general sense of satisfaction of having one over on somebody. It may, in some instances, be made to make money, and that's important if you're thinking about countermeasures and legislation and educational moves to reduce the harm caused by a variety of offences whose primary motive isn't necessarily to make money. With serious and organised crime, the primary motive is to make money. Okay. There's a big EU-funded criminological research project, the Cyber TNOC, the Cyber Transnational Organised Crime Project. Go and have a look at this. It's a fantastic resource if it's an area that you're interested in. Like I said, ESRC funded, and the focus of the project gives some key insights. Their work is going to focus on modern slavery and the sale of illicit drugs, the propagation of malware and money laundering, including money muling. So again, this fits in neatly with some of the other topics that we've looked at, where we've looked at things like fraud and money laundering. So we were looking back last week, for example, just there to the use of so-called virtual currencies, cryptocurrencies, and how they're ideal for the purposes of money laundering. So again, if you're interested in organised crime, money laundering, do have a quick look at last week's session on cryptocurrencies as well. Now these crimes create a lot of online data. Okay, so they're taking advantage of the technology in order to go about their business, but it does mean that, like the rest of us, they do leave digital footprints, they do leave data trails. So that can actually be useful in terms of collecting digital forensic evidence. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind. So it's not all a negative thing when it comes to crime and technology, because although they're taking advantage of the technologies to commit crimes, it does mean they themselves are vulnerable to the kind of surveillance and the kind of data tracking that we can be as individuals and when we're targeted as victims. One of the people involved in it is Professor Michael Levy. Okay, very high profile criminologist, go and look him up. He's got a fantastic body of work. Happens to come from the same hometown as me. Right, and as we can see, great quote from Michael here, traffickers can also use social networks and online advertising sites to market, recruit, sell and exploit victims of modern slavery. These criminals resort to centralized virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies to conceal the illicit origin of their finances and to invest in the legal economy. So again, linking back, if you were in the session last week, or look at the recording of it, where we were talking about money laundering and how you have to kind of convert things into assets and stuff. So one way to do it is to invest in property, for example. Again, I've talked repeatedly about the London property market and the issues around money laundering and organised criminal activities that are centred around, for example, London and the property market there. But go look up Professor Michael Levy. Fantastic body research if this is an area that you are interested in. Okay, fantastic. The Europol report. So as I said, I've pulled up some sections here and got some bits out of some particular reports. You can go and I won't do it now. You can click on. You can call up the PDF of these full where they're on the sites. Okay, have a look. So if you're looking at this area, look at 2 or 3 of these reports. Look at the reference and supporting sections. Look at the recommendations. They cover this really, really well. Okay, and the key points to putting over is how, like a lot of other businesses, so we got to the 1990s, kind of got to the coming up to the millennium, got the dot-com boom. Lots of businesses suddenly looked at what was going on with the internet and with the World Wide Web, and it was the World Wide Web that had a really high profile at the time. That was since this big new thing. Well, just like a lot of legitimate businesses went, ooh, we can take advantage of all this technology and the faster communications and the greater reach out to customers, etc., etc. Okay, and then organised criminal gangs have looked at that same thing and gone, wow, how can we take advantage of this, right? So this is exactly what they've done. So whether it's individual criminals that we've looked at in other sessions, or where we're looking at these criminal organisations, then they've looked at adopting that. It's not just about how they can use the technology to actually commit crimes as well. It's also, as a big business, okay, then how do you kind of, how do you organise your staff? How do you organise your resources? How do you have timely communications so that you're reacting to things that are going on? How do you finance things, etc.? How do you operate as a lean, efficient business machine? So actually, organised crime is equally interested in things like, having access to spreadsheets and to email and to perhaps having websites and intranets and other types of networks that it needs to function as a business, albeit a criminal enterprise. Okay, so there's that kind of stuff that's going on there, as well as the kind of the more sexy and the more frontline stuff where we're looking at money laundering, we're looking at exploitation, we're looking at hacking, etc., etc. And again, I won't read all this out now. You can read it here. These are extracts from the Europol report. Really, if it's an area you're interested in, go and have a look at it. Engage with these reports. We flag you up to these reports because somebody spent a lot of time putting these together. Somebody with access and expertise, okay, to these frontline organisations in the fight against organised criminal enterprises, against organised crime. Go take advantage of it. So, and again, they've got access to, map data, street views, reconnaissance. They've got information to look about shipping use and schedules and all kinds of stuff. They can go look up information about, the best way to make drugs and explosives, that kind of thing. Tips on social, operational skill, all kinds of stuff. So they themselves also need to be protected against hackers. The last thing you want is making huge amounts of money through people trafficking and laundering money, all through the sale of drugs or hacking or whatever, and then become a victim of organised crime yourself, or even unorganised hackers. Okay, so don't forget that criminals can also be victims. Yeah, So you may have somebody who is an absolutely brilliant fraudster, and who then gets mugged walking down the street. Well, it's the same with organised crime, right? So they need to protect themselves. If they're operating on the internet, they can also become victims. Equally, they want to make it very difficult for law enforcement agencies to be able to access their networks and follow information about them. So they're trying to take advantage of the technology, but at the same time, they have to be careful not to become a victim of the technology themselves. And again, there's lots of information that's become widely available now that wasn't at one time. So at one time, you might have had to have gone and bribed a shipping clerk to get the shipping rosters for ships coming in and out of a particular harbour or something, if you were looking to either steal or be somehow fraudulently be smuggling goods through and working with somebody, okay? Whereas now there are databases. I can go live online now, okay, on the internet, and I can see the location of pretty much all the vessels in the world. Yeah, they're there on the maps, and they're trackable, and I can see the schedules and all kinds of stuff. And that's really fantastic and efficient in terms of our global logistics. But if I were a criminal interested in exploiting some issues of maritime weaknesses or smuggling or whatever it happens to be, I can also take advantage of that. This is again, continue from the Europol right here. They've got some good definitions of how they look at cybercrime. Again, links into some of the key themes on the module. Okay, so some of the things we keep saying. So they keep saying it's a global phenomenon. It's borderless as the internet itself. Itself, it's just getting increasingly digitized. So all these things that we're talking about, the fact that it's global, the fact that it crosses traditional policing jurisdictions, that causes lots of problems. That's all true, and criminal organisations can then exploit that. They can look at exploiting that kind of thing. And again, good source of quotes in terms of how exactly we define cybercrime, because Europol. You could also go and have a look at the National Crime Agency here, or the National Centre for Cybersecurity, or go and look at the FBI specialist site. Find police organisations and look at their working definitions of cybercrime. That's quite useful to do against some of the formal legislative definitions of cybercrime, okay, which we'd also encourage you to look at, and we flagged up and we put links in at various bits through the lecture. So again, the more threatening stuff is ransomware, malware, fraud of different types, child exploitation, people trafficking, the smuggling of drugs, the smuggling of weapons, also things like sanctions busting, the smuggling of things like oil and stuff like that, okay. So sometimes you may be smuggling, especially with ships, huge quantities of oil or huge quantities of minerals, where, for example, it's very profitable because a regime that's been kind of effectively blacklisted internationally needs these things to be smuggled in. As well as smuggling the things you'd expect, so things like cigarettes, booze, things that avoid alcohol and that kind of stuff. And then there'll be times when you're smuggling fake goods and all this kind of stuff as well. Okay, again, links back into some of the things on the bits of the module. What's useful here, and it goes right back to the start of the module again, is just to think about a couple of ways to think about crime. And this is quite a useful approach to take. I've flagged it up a couple of times, but again, put it in here. This idea of cyber-dependent crime, and this is crimes that can only be committed using computers, right, or targeted at computers. So things like hacking and stuff like that, or things around the kind of the generation of cryptocurrencies. Okay, so the cyber-dependent crime, so it's stuff that can only happen because of the fact that we've got this technology and we're using this technology, and it's kind of focused on the technology itself. So hacking is the one that I said, malware is another one. Cyber facilitated crime is where we're looking at crimes that have perhaps been around, but they've morphed in terms of how they manifest themselves because of the technology. So again, especially things like child sexual abuse, things like issues like a kind of blackmail, which we now see as sextortion, the distribution, sorry, abuse online and this kind of stuff. So there's some stuff that was kind of widely out there in society, right, but is now manifesting itself in a kind of cyber facilitated way. Yeah, so cyber stalking, cyber harassment, cyber sexual abuse, that kind of thing, cyber fraud, so certain types of fraud where it's the old games of fraud, including lots of social engineering, but it's now being done via social media and things like that. as opposed to the very much cyber-dependent crime, which is more focused on and absolutely can only kind of be there because of the technology, such as hacking, malware attacks, denial of service attacks, this kind of stuff. Okay, so it's a useful thing to bear that in mind. The criminal use of CMCs, computer mediated communication. Okay, again, this is a term going right back to the beginning. So we often talk about the internet, we talk about the World Wide Web, but more generally, you can use this umbrella term, computer mediated communication. Okay, so it's any communication that's mediated, i.e. facilitated and done by computers. And a few years ago, we concentrated on things like email. We could also look at text messaging and stuff. But increasingly now, we think about how this encompasses a much wider range of things. So all the social media channels that you would think to use, they're all essentially a subset of computer mediated communications. So whilst something like email be seen as old-fashioned, it's still quite useful to be aware of that. And again, we had some lectures where we talked about email right at the start of term 1, because there were lessons to be learned from email, and the problems that we encountered with email and early computer messaging systems, okay, they've now kind of morphed, and they're now situated within things like the big social media networks, okay, and also a lot of the apps that we use on phones. So things like WhatsApp and Telegram and Snapchat and various things like that. They throw up some new versions of problems, but actually we could go back 20 years, 30 years to email, and some of the problems we first encountered there, such as the inappropriate sharing of images, inappropriate jokes in office spaces, using those communication things to harass people, okay? That was all done before you got your kind of modern phones with your lovely kind of apps and stuff on, right? So just because we're now looking at a world of like mobile phones, and we're looking at lots of things that are apps and they're colourful and stuff, there are new versions of old problems that are rooted in computer mediated communications that are in there. So that's the point of this kind of stuff, okay? And as I've already said, preemptively, that criminals will use these, especially if you think classically routine activity theory, right? Cliche, but it's true. If I'm a motivated offender, I need to reach out to my kind of, vulnerable, my potential victims. Okay, these vulnerable targets I'm seeking. Using these communication channels is a fantastic way to do it. But like I said earlier, because I'm like often preempt myself, they're also in terms of their internal communication. So if you're running this business, if I'm a major drug dealer, okay, or if I'm coordinating hacking attacks around the world, then within my organisation, I need to have good, efficient services. Why wouldn't I be using email, text, and other things? Why would I be using the post or fax messaging or something? Okay, of course I'm going to adopt these same technologies as part of running my business. Again, just the Europol report, and if it's now you're interested in, I picked this up because it was just such a fantastic resource. I've linked into some others as well. Okay, but if it's an area you're interested in, do go and look at these. These are kind of must reads if it's an area that you're interested in. And again, they've identified some specific things that are happening, and the fact is, keep things change and move very quickly. So again, even in terms of romance scams, or hacking attacks, or other types of online fraudulent operations, what happens, of course, is that people work out new ways to scam people. Okay, it might be fundamentally the kind of the old tricks that are being used, but they'll latch onto new things, or they'll come up with a slightly new guise or a new way of coming into it. After a while, the police become aware of it, right? We then get public information alerts and stuff about it. We get slightly more cautious about it, right? But so then a new variant will appear on it. Okay, it also does mean that new areas are exploited occasionally. So with things like romance scams, for example, that was something that wasn't really around very much when people were kind of engaged in email stuff, but once people got more used to the idea of social media and more social activities online, then the romance scam, which was around before the internet and stuff like that, okay, has been an area that's kind of developed, and exactly how they run the scams has developed as people get more aware of stuff, etc. So again, if you want to go and look at that as a subset, go and have a look where we put some links up onto now, back to romance scams, which we've done with some of the social media things, and we've linked in romance scams, and we had some stuff earlier on this term about it. And again, what I said is, the technology can also be a very, really useful thing for the law enforcement authorities to fight organised crime stuff. So where they've got this power of access to, they've got their own tools and expertise. Okay, generally they're outnumbered, but they've got their own tools and expertise. So if they can trace physical addresses based on IP addresses, or they can build up maps of communication where we know this person's been talking to this person, to this person, to this person, using different services, then that can be really valuable in beginning to build up your intelligence and work out, who's actually running these organisations, which are the key node points, where does all the information seem to be flowing to and from, if we're trying to identify the key people in it. Okay, so again, a bit like when we're kind of tackling street level drug use, the police can arrest street level drug users, and drug dealers, but they're much more interested in looking further up the pyramid, further up the food chain, as to who's actually organising it and running it. And it's the same with a lot of cyber-enabled or facilitated crimes. Okay, and part of that is gathering information, this kind of stuff. Not without its controversies, of course. So I'm on about coordinating stuff during public process and stuff, and it's great for monitoring and surveillance and picking up intelligence, which can be directly useful in the fight against crime. But they have to be careful not to overstep that mark. And some technologies, especially the use of drones, gets people a bit twitchy, and especially the use of facial recognition in public areas makes people very twitchy. Okay, especially if you're linking it up to artificial intelligence powered somehow, artificial intelligence facilitated databases, etc. Looking at some of the UK Home Office research, and again the UK Home Office does lots of research itself. So this is a report from 2018, so it's really quite recent. As I do keep saying to people, especially for kind of government reports and official reports, don't worry if something is not 2020. If it's just a year or two, kind of from a year or two ago, that's perfectly okay. These things take a while to put together, a while to get officially published, etc., etc. What's going on in 2020? Well, people will be currently gathering data and trying to work that out. Okay, and you might get some reports come out towards the end of 2020 or in 2020, but much more likely reports will come out in 2021, i.e., sometime next year, about what's going on this year, and that's pretty quick to have comprehensive reports. Okay, and comprehensive sets of policy responses that you've discussed and you're willing to publish. So November 2018, right? So in the great scheme of things, this is quite recent. Serious and organised crime threats to the UK. This is a screen grab from the UK Home Office report. Again, there's a link in from the notes on this PowerPoint to it, and links in from now as well to the Home Office report. So what they're looking at, you can see the key things they've identified, you can read it, but some of the key things that are of interest to us as the module is cybercrime, and then through that money laundering, especially if we're looking at real cryptocurrencies, child sexual exploitation and abuse, because an awful lot of that is online now, or it's a kind of hybrid blended model. Okay, again, organised immigration crime, where we look at people smuggling, and it goes into modern slave and trafficking. Fraud and financial crime, so we're definitely interested in. Okay, and illegal drugs. Well, if we're, it might be thinking about the manufacturer, but crucially, this kind of how do we bring buyers and suppliers together? Okay, so this is where we can think about how social media is used, but especially people will think about the dark web. Okay, and things like Silk Road and stuff. Silk Road's now been busted, but these illicit marketplaces. Okay, but at a much more simple level, of course, is that we could go in and we could use the dark web and variations of Silk Road and stuff, or if I want to buy some drugs and I've got a contact, then I may email them, I may text them, I may message them, I may telegram them, I may do various things. So I'm using this low level stuff. I may even actually make a phone call on that and ring them and say, I'm down the pub later, bring some stuff along. Yeah, so again, it might be a kind of technical complex level, but just think about everyday stuff, how you organise your lives, how you arrange to meet your mates down the pub. It's also how people arrange to meet their dealers and stuff. Yeah, they can take advantage of that technology in all kinds of ways. So they've organised key threats on here. some of which, like I said, are key to the module. Go and have a look at the report and see how some of these meet with the key module themes and stuff. How we respond to it, again, they've come up with this quite useful diagram. Diagrams are obviously quite good because it's much better than sometimes having really lengthy text. And you've got this sense of what they're looking to do. So one of their things they're trying to do is use targeted action to disrupt the most prolific offenders using the powers that they've got available. And there are prolific offenders, but there are also those kind of key offenders that they're after as well. And they try to build defence and resilience in against organised crime. Try to stop the problem at the source. And organised crime might be based, for example, in the UK, but of course, organised crime, it may be based overseas. And we've kind of, we're seeing their UK branch of a kind of a global organised network that's operating this kind of thing they've got to do. And again, they're looking at this idea of a kind of whole system approach, that you can't just kind of tackle individual little bits. You've got to look at what's going on. You've got to cooperate internationally. This idea about a global reach, about pooling skills, expertise, etc., etc., etc. This also goes back to one of the key things that we've often said about how do you police various types of high-tech crime, is that if we look at the traditional county policing model, for example, in England, Wales, 43 regional forces, the county forces, they haven't got Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire, whoever, bless them, for all the goodwill of individual officers, don't have that critical mass of expertise. So what we see, and we've talked about this in other lectures, is you set up specialist units. So things like the National Crime Agency, the National Centre for Cyber Security, FBI specialist centres, etc., etc. You have to pull skills or have a critical mass of skills to come together. So whilst organised crime may be organised but distributed, often the responses to it have to, at some point, become centralised, okay, or have a small number of node points to bring together a critical mass of expertise and to make sure there's a certain level of coordination going on at national and international levels in order to counter this. Again, just an example of the kind of criminal markets that go on, how they operate, and this is useful because this is how the Home Office, how they conceptualise the criminal markets operating. And they need to be able to conceptualise it in order to think about, well, how do we disrupt it, how do we minimise it, etc., etc., etc. So again, that's just in there. It's part of a bigger report. Go and look it up if you're interested, if it's an area that you're interested in. The Home Office has concluded, you'll find that Europol and other organisations have concluded similar things, that serious and organised crime, broad, wide-ranging problems affecting individuals, victims, communities and society. More generally, requiring this idea of a joined up whole system response, right? So that's why you have these kind of meta police units. So you have these police units that sit over and above what's going on. You may also find times when the police will be also operating with specialist government units who may have additional expertise and know what's going on. So you get a kind of a crossover at certain levels, perhaps between the functions of the policing services and also the kind of the security services. Okay, so how does technology contribute to complexities and scale of it? Well, have a little think about it, but really it's going back to what were these key underlying characteristics that would recur throughout the module. So these low costs of entry, the fact that it's really scalable, the fact that it allows the kind of rapid innovation, iterations, reinventions of organisations, the rapid proliferation of ideas and stuff like that. So just like we see fun memes and stuff rapidly move across the internet, okay, then novel approaches to perhaps defrauding people can also rapidly proliferate across the internet. Novel approaches to hacking into systems can also rapidly proliferate across the internet, and ways in which to make your money laundering more efficient, okay, may rapidly proliferate around the internet and through these organisations and stuff. So they're not different to us necessarily. They may have a different set of kind of ethical values by which they operate. They are criminal organisations after all, but how they interact as individuals to some extent with the technology, okay, is the same kind of things that happens to us and to the other people we're observing throughout the module. Again, Europol, fantastic report, the International Internet Organised Crime Threat Assistant. Go and have a look at it. just to show you that this is, I'll just quickly, I'll click onto this, take you through to the Europol site. If it takes too long, I'll cut this bit out. So, yeah. So again, Europol, fantastic. Go and have a look at this. Lots of detailed stuff. You can go and have a look at this. You can download the entire threat assessment thing. Really useful. Gives you a sense of the priorities that are going on. Okay. So let's just jump back into the PowerPoint. So to save you going into the report, okay, here are some of the crime priorities from that report, and you get a sense of some of the key things and how they go into the module. If this is an area that does interest you, then go and look at that report and go and look at the other reports that I've linked to you from now. Okay, it's not possible in the time that we have, even if we had like a kind of 50-minute traditional lecture, to go into all this stuff in detail. But for those of you who are interested in this area, then I've put lots of links and kind of gateways into really good sources, so you won't spend hours and hours googling for all kinds of stuff. Go and start with these sources. That'll give you a really good head start. And again, what they've looked at, and it's quite useful the way they've looked at it, is like cyber dependent crime. So looking at malware, attacks on critical infrastructure, data breaches, future threats, and so on. Again, go and have a look at this. Is all detailed in the report itself. Child sexual exploitation, so whether it's online sexual coercion, live streaming of child sexual abuse, something that we've touched upon elsewhere. So innovations in child sexual abuse. So again, go back to the lectures where we looked at this, and this idea that if you go to, for example, live streaming child sexual abuse, what it means is that there are not files and stuff that are out there on the internet that can be found by law enforcement. So we know there are lots of child sexual abuse images and videos, and they're both on the main web and can also be found on the deep web. Well, if they're out there, law enforcement can look for them and find them, right? But if a video doesn't exist as such, then how can we find it? Well, this is where the live streaming comes in, because the video doesn't exist until the live streaming of the offence takes place, and then the video doesn't necessarily exist. It's certainly not on the originating website and IP address once the live stream finishes. Okay, now maybe other individuals screen capture the live stream or something like that. Okay, so there are still weaknesses there. I mean weaknesses in the terms of if I was trying to avoid any kind of digital footprint. Okay, so there are still chances for law enforcement to find copies of it, and there are chances for law enforcement or for the big tech companies to pick up the live streams while the live streams are taking place. But you can imagine that a live stream that's there for a while and then disappears is even more difficult to get than where you've got images and video clips and stuff that are kind of out there that are being stored and hosted in lots of different places. Okay, and again, things like payment fraud and stuff, they've gone through, identified some key categories. This is stuff that links back to other sessions we looked at, criminal markets, cyber terrorism, etc. Go and have a look at this if you're interested. Geographic distribution of cybercrime stuff. Again, lots of really interesting stuff there. Lots of this stuff links back to other sessions that we've had in the module. Oops. Okay, so organised crime equals business. Okay, it might be bad business, criminal enterprise, right? But it does in some ways act like a normal business. It's looking to exploit the technology to conduct its business, whatever that is. It's looking for all the normal benefits of the technology, as we said. So it's looking for faster communications. It's looking for cost savings. It's looking for flexibility in how it organises and can reorganise itself. Yeah. So for all the reasons that the university has adopted these technologies, for all the reasons the local authority here or the government or all kinds of businesses have adopted these, organised crime as a business will seek to do those as well. And organised crimes will also seek to exploit some of the technologies for its core business aims, which of course are the criminal exploitation of other people in the world. Yeah. So again, international reach with minimal friction, cost efficiencies, new abilities, etc., etc., etc. So again, if I'm involved in people smuggling these days, then I will be using mobile phone technologies. I will be logging into systems. I will be tracking the movements of people. If I'm If I've got people acting as money mules, or people who are physically smuggling currency, for example, so I paid somebody to smuggle lots of currency or whatever else that needs to be physically smuggled, so we put them onto a plane, and when I put them onto a plane, the handler at one airport will alert the handler at the other airport that these people are coming in. Okay, so we know we're trying to keep track of these people. I could also keep track of the flights online because I can do live tracking. If there's any delays or anything, I can take account of that. So there's all kinds of stuff that I will do like a business person to run my business. So in conclusion, it's a fast-moving and expanding area. It neatly demonstrates some key issues arising from the technology. It's an increasingly well-researched area, partly because it's an increasingly problematic area. And so whilst there's a slight lag, okay, a lot of police forces have now put a lot of expertise into this. It's become a priority for them to tackle. Ties in closely with other lectures and module themes from the module. Like I said, there is the lecture capture of the lecture available from last year, but hopefully this has been a useful little run through for you, and have a look on now as well for some additional materials and stuff around this. Okay.